Bonfire Sports TV. Darrin, where did this come from? What is the origin story? What do you hope to get out of it?
It's really just an opportunity to continue to deliver sports content and opinions to the fans. We know there's a real hunger and thirst for it here in Winnipeg, and we want it to be more than that. We want it to be beyond Winnipeg. I had a show on TSN radio years ago called CFL 60, and it was a 60-minute weekly magazine covering the league from a Winnipeg perspective. We still want to do that, but we want to ensure that we cover every CFL team from coast to coast, the potential American partnership news, the X's and O's on the field, to the greater, conversations had, in personnel circles and in political circles and all of it. It really came down to just wanting to create an entity and as a launching point. We're going to start with Canadian football. We're going to continue to move forward. We live in Canada. We're obviously going to get to hockey eventually, but we really wanted to start with our bread and butter. It's definitely mine. Jeff Hamilton, has really cut his teeth as a Canadian Football League newsbreaker. We're looking forward to really seeing what it kind of grows into more than anything.
I was really happy when I saw that you guys were launching this, I'll be honest. And it's, I think a lot of people would look at it from a capitalistic perspective and they would say, well, you've got Canadian football perspective and there's other people launching a podcast that's talking all things Canadian football. Oh, that's competition. I was like, no, like you've always been one of my dudes. You were great when you came on radio with us. I loved when you did CFL 60. I thought that was kind of groundbreaking because I honestly thought that was the type of show that TSN radio would want to pick up nationally, right? Where it's like that magazine like style cover that you talk about where you could pick it up from coast to coast and cover absolutely everything. And so when I saw it come up, I was like, this is great. And then I saw you had Jeff Hamilton on it and I was so much happier because I love what Jeff brings to the table. I love how honest he is. I love the approach that he has. You know him better than anybody, but I loved going to Bombers walkthroughs or whatever the day before games and being able to sit around for an hour and pick his brain on stuff because that guy knows he knows how the game is played. Like it doesn't matter what sport it is. He knows the ins and outs and the way that they should be approached. And then you've been around, you've written for the NHL, you've done all sorts of different freelance work. You've covered through TSN, you've been on TSN.ca. And so I love the idea of you guys pairing up together. And I was wondering when I saw that you guys paired up together, because I was happy by it. I'm going, yeah, but what's the origin story? I'm like, when did you and Jeff actually kind of like knock heads for the first time and go, oh, okay, yeah, I like what this guy's about.
Yeah, it's interesting how they always say, like, if you're in Winnipeg, you're never like, if you're in a room of people in Winnipeg, there's one person from Saskatchewan. Like that's a given. There's one Riders fan. But it's like 3 degrees of separation in Winnipeg. Everybody seems to know each other or knows somebody who knows that person. Jeff and I actually go far back. He used to bartend at my local watering hole before he went to Carleton and studied journalism. I went to high school with his sister. I've known his brother-in-law since we were in diapers. We became good friends when he graduated and started covering the Gold Eyes and started covering the Bombers and the Jets. We just started hanging out and sparking up a friendship, kind of like we'd known each other our whole lives, which through 1 or 2 degrees of separation we did. I'm a reporter, I'm a broadcaster, I'm a host, and I'm a writer. But Jeff is somebody who I think brings a great element to this show. I've hosted shows, pre and post game shows, magazine shows, that sort of thing on traditional radio. Jeff is a journalist. Jeff is a digger of information. Jeff is a sourced individual who knows what's going on because of the relationships that he's curated and built through the years. But I think what our viewers and the audience is going to enjoy the most is that Jeff isn't afraid to say it how it is.
Yeah.
Jeff is not afraid to bring the truth and bring a little bit of true opinion and a little bit of heat. We're not a hot take show. We're not hot take artists, but Jeff has some strong takes and I have some strong takes. And while our personalities are a little bit different, I don't know if I could find a better co-host or build a better co-host from the ground up. We balance each other really well, I feel, and that's what I'm really looking forward to in the show. I know the conversations we have after a game till 2 and 3 in the morning, debating about what happened in the game, or whether it's all afternoon or all morning on the phone about what's going to happen, at practice that day. That's what we're looking forward to putting on camera and presenting to the audience. And I think we're really focusing on it being high production value and high visual interest for the people out there, for the audience, because if you can do that, have great information, great opinions, great debate and conversation, and you put it in a visually attractive medium, I think it's just, that's the recipe what we're looking for.
Yeah, totally. I'm with you on all of that. It's funny when you talk about, Jeff just kind of like saying it as it is, because not to flatter him while he's not here to defend or applaud himself, but there's been so many times on Twitter where I've thought something, I've typed it out, and I've been like, you know what, it's a little too hot. I'm going to let this one be. And 10 minutes later, Jeff will tweet it out. And I'll see it. And then internally, or, I'll DM him and be like, yes, I'm so happy that you sent this out, kind of thing, because I do love that he has that kind of straight shooter mentality. And I would also say too, in terms of the way that you guys balance off each other, for those of our listeners who don't know what you guys are about, like if I were to be a programming director and to find two people that I would want to pair together to do a radio show, it would be you guys, honestly. And that's why I thought this was such an interesting pairing and such a great endeavor. And so I want people to try and follow up again at Bonfire Sports TV is the place they can find it. CFL 360 is the name of the show, and they can dive into it there. And I'm sure that we'll be retweeting a bunch of the stuff that you guys are doing as well, with all that great production value that you're talking about. But I did want to have you on to talk a little bit about some CFL stuff, to give people a little bit of a teaser here on what's to come for what you guys are doing. And the first thing I want to start with is coming out of a Grey Cup championship through a pandemic year. What is the mood in Winnipeg? Like, what is that city about right now with the team that they are going back into another CFL season with, as the still defending Grey Cup champions, knowing what they were previously?
Well, uncharted territory, right? Like, none of us have been here before, and even generations past, none of us have been here before, in it being so long since we've seen action on the field, it being like 20 months or whatever it is since, you and I were on the field at the 107th Grey Cup in Van Stadium when, Andrew Harris had that ridiculous day and that defense absolutely shut down what everybody expected to be, a powerful, diverse Hamilton Tiger Cats offense. The appetite here in Winnipeg, I think, it's almost, I mentioned this on another show earlier this week. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. And I think without football for this long, and, I know it's been a 20-year Grey Cup drought in Hamilton. It was 29 years here in Winnipeg. So for, Chris Streveler to gain legendary status, shirtless with the sunglasses and the fur coat during the Grey Cup parade, swilling beers, and, that moment that was, and then we entered into a winter. People were looking forward, to the Jets making a playoff run again, and boom, pandemic hits in early March and everything shuts down. And then summer comes, and the CFL is the only professional sports league in North America that didn't get onto the field or the ice or the court. And I think that was tough for a lot of people. Tongue in cheek, I'll say, I think people in Winnipeg are proud that the Bombers have been able to be defending Grey Cup champions for 2 years. But I think they would trade that in a second to see action on the field. And when things were announced here, that the CFL was back and we got a 14-game schedule, and it's Bombers Ticats at IG Field, August 5th. I think, that excitement and that anticipation level here in Winnipeg was at that fever pitch, like I think it was in a lot of places. This team has brought back a lot of the same guys, like Kalaris and Harris and that entire offensive line, and Willie Jefferson and Jeff Coate and Adam Bighill in the middle, and so many of the DBs from Maston to Nick Taylor, and Mike Jones, who was a freak in that game, came out of nowhere. Who is this guy? We didn't even see that guy in Winnipeg until the Grey Cup, and he was making plays all over the field. But that's the most intriguing part of this, Marsh. And that's what has me excited is we don't know what we're going to get until they're actually playing each other. Like, we don't know who's going to be good. Like, Hamilton's going to be good. You got two good quarterbacks. You got a great defense. You got continuity in coaching. The Bombers are going to be good. Jason Moss with the Riders. What's this Edmonton Elks team going to look like? Is Mike Riley and the BC Lions under Rick Campbell, are they going to be able to put something together? What are the Argos going to look like? I think Montreal is going to surprise a lot of people. Paul Appolice and Matt Nichols reunited, not Nick Arbuckle, not the guy Paul Appolice told me last winter he'd watched all the film on. He's got his old guy in Matt Nick. We don't know what we're going to get until we hit the field. I can't imagine what the odds makers are talking about right now as far as putting money down, but someone's going to get rich off of a pretty healthy bet.
Yeah, no doubt. It's such a science experiment, man. You're so right.
Yes.
It's like the whole thing is, let's just throw all Elizondo going into Edmonton and, like you say, Riley and having him with maybe a cleaner offensive line to start the season. And it's like, well, we don't know what that looks like. Let's find out what that looks. There's so much stuff that there's so many variables. And the other thing that I find super interesting, and especially after I saw the quotes coming out this week from different CFL coaches, including Craig Dickinson in Saskatchewan, was the idea that, yeah, there's going to be 20 guys that are going to get cut across the league that people don't expect to get cut, and they're just going to get cut because they're not ready, or they're not athletically in shape, or they didn't train hard enough, or they got outworked in training camp because it's a 21-day training camp. So for the first time in a long time in the CFL, you can actually have somebody outwork someone over the longevity of a training camp and prove that they deserve a role. So when I see that people are going to get let go and we're going to have players that are going to show up that aren't in shape and all the rest, I just keep going, man, the average year in the CFL, you'll get a Bear Woods who gets cut from Montreal, and we all go, oh, and we can't believe it. Oh my goodness. It's like, okay, but CFL fans, don't you think, Darren, really need to start wrapping their minds around the idea that there might be 10 Bear Woods this year? There might be somewhere from 10 to 15 to 20 guys that who you trust, who you are familiar with, who in the league, they get cut, and you go, how could they possibly cut that? And it's like, no, the team probably knows best. They know what they need to do. And maybe it's salary cap casualties and all the rest, but I really do think there's going to be a lot of those in training camp where a lot of fans, including ourselves, who were even in the media, think we know somebody, think we know the situation. I don't think we do going into this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at the Toronto Argonauts and John Murphy and all of the signings that he's made, and people wonder if, with this kind of salary cap floor for 2021, if they're going to be able to make it work. I've been following that kind of John Murphy, Jim Pop saga closely because it's so intertwined with the Zach Collaros trade at the 11th hour before trade deadline in 2019, where, Kyle Walters is feverishly on the phone with the league and with Jim Pop trying to get Zach Collaros out of Toronto before Jim Pop loses his job. People don't realize how close that was to not happening at all. And I don't think I think the Ticats would be easy Grey Cup champs right now, in my opinion, if that trade didn't happen. But you're right. It is an absolute science experiment. And we're going to see a lot of those veteran players cut. I have no doubt. You got 2 Canadian draft classes. I also think something people haven't talked about is you're going to have twice as many, there's been 2 years, American football hasn't stopped.
Yeah.
Here in Winnipeg, whether it's Danny McManus or Ted Gavaya, scouting for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the US, they've spent twice as much time. They're still down there traveling. They're still watching college football and those games and scouting, and guys are signing. I know the Blue Bombers cut a defensive back today that nearly made the team in 2019. And when they signed him again in 2020, we expect this guy to, really be pushing for one of those rookie starter spots that we know every CFL team needs. They need a rookie defensive back to start almost every year. Definitely here in Winnipeg. That's how Kyle Walters does it. And they cut him. They cut him last week.
Yeah.
So what happened? Well, we got better guys. So there you have it. You're already starting to see what can happen with a year gone by. And then, of course, there's the strategy in it all. Some teams are going to be more aggressive. Others are going to be more conservative. in veterans versus young players and team continuity and how it's all going to come together. No preseason games. That's going to factor in a lot. It'll be interesting to see if these joint practices are allowed. The Blue Bombers and the Rough Riders are trying to get some, maybe not a scrimmage, but they want to get some group drills going together to see if they can get some competitive blood flowing and play against some different guys before actual games start and they really start to matter. It's going to be fascinating. I think it's, shows like yours, Marsh, that people are going to be locked into to really kind of understand a lot of those small moves that are made that can have huge differences once the games begin.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's going to be the stuff that when we get to week one, it still might take some time to sink in who's there and who's not. But if fans are really tuned in, like you're saying, to shows like CFL 360 and ours and otherwise, then you're going to figure out, 2-3 weeks in, okay, here's what actually does matter. But you mentioned the joint practices, the crossover stuff. Do you think that's a good idea? Because I have talked with Kyle Mello about this. I'm like, man, for me, and I'm not trying to coerce your opinion on this, but when I look at it, I think to myself, 2 years basically of not playing football with football type guys who you and I know are ultra competitive, to being the Riders and the Bombers who the vets will know each other very well. They'll have nothing to lose. They'll be getting set for a camp. It's a long camp. Anytime there's a long camp, everybody's going to get grumpy, especially the vets. They're going to be the grumpiest in the entire group. And I looked at the idea of that when I saw Jeremy O'Day mention that, and I went, man, I don't think that that's a good idea, because the last thing that the CFL wants as PR getting back into the swing of things is, hey, training camps are open. By the way, closed practice, Bombers, Riders, huge fight. No media was allowed in. No fans were allowed in. But it's like the optics of like there being an actual legitimate fight in a training camp practice, which seems inevitable based on what usually happens in these crossover practices. I was like, I don't know if that's a great idea. I understand the concept of trying to get your team ready, but I feel like if you put enough of green and white and blue and gold on the same field together, something's going to happen. And I don't know if that's going to be a great look.
I didn't even really think of it on that level, but you're right. Especially like O-line, D-line. Like if you're a young guy competing for, say, the Blue Bombers defensive end spot. You want to be the reserve behind Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat. How do you stand out? Right?
Yep.
You got to do something that's going to catch Richie Hall's attention, Mike O'Shea's attention. What are you going to do? And you start putting them up against guys that they don't have to sit next to in the locker room or sit across from at the lunch table. It could get nasty real quick. The Bombers are preparing for it to happen. They're preparing for these joint practices to happen. I can't imagine they'll put them through gauntlet drills and things like that, where they're just hat on hat, pure violence on the field. But I think the health officials are probably going to step in and say, look, we've said you guys can play football games August 5th. I don't know about, 2-3 weeks earlier having a joint practice, even in a controlled environment, because it goes beyond the health of the players with hamstrings and shoulders and, that sort of thing. I think it goes into COVID protocol as well.
Yeah,
so it raises a whole other question. Like, you can't, can you ask players to be double vaccinated before they come to Canada or before they step on the field, or is it the personal choice? And then the 60,000 rapid tests that Health Canada has provided, the Canadian Football League, how's that going to work? I did a little quick math last week, and it's 50 tests per team per day for the regular season. Well, you got 100 guys in the room during training camp, plus support staff and coaches, and then the people prepping your food and cleaning the room. There's a lot of moving pieces for this training camp. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah. And it's funny when you do the math on it, you're like, wow, they have so many rapid tests available. That's amazing. And then you quickly figure out, yeah, but how many do they have available per person, per day, per different parts of the team? And you go, yeah, I don't think those are going to last.
You can see the NHL and NBA. That's no problem pulling that off.
Right.
Football is that's different level. You've been in those locker rooms, whether it's a Tuesday afternoon or a Saturday night after a game. The intermingling is unlike any other professional sports locker room.
Yeah.
So, and if heaven forbid, fingers crossed, there's an outbreak. hopefully not. It could spread really fast, but hopefully they got all the protocols in place and we can, have a real season here.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I found interesting you were talking about there is the idea of, and this might be something for Jeff, just because I know that he's dug in on a lot of CBA stuff before, but players going full contact on each other where in their own CBA, they're not allowed to go full contact against each other, like internally on their own team. So I don't know how they're going to be able, and I don't know if you have heard anything about this, but I've wondered how would they be able to have the Bombers and the Riders go into full contact crossover practices against each other when in their own CBA that's been signed off by all of the players that are involved, basically they're not able to go full contact on their own teammates. So why would they be able to go full contact before the season actually begins on anybody else's teammates? I guess was my question. And I'm not against it. It was just in terms of the weaving your way through this uncharted territory that we're talking about. That was one of the first things that popped into my mind when I heard about crossover practices.
Well, I do remember a couple years ago when the CFL and individual teams talked about not having contact during practices and how carefully, especially the offensive linemen, because those are the guys I went to immediately. And I asked them, how hard is it to practice, like really practice when you can't truly hit the guy in front of you? Like run blocking comes down to exerting your own force onto the defensive lineman or the linebacker. How do you practice that when you can't have contact during the week?
Yeah.
And there I am doing, a pre and post game show with the greatest offensive lineman in CFL history and Chris Walby. And he's talking about his days playing under Cal Murphy here in Winnipeg in the 80s and 90s. And, especially like the early and mid 1980s, like it was 2-a-days and it was full contact for 3 hours times 2 every day. And now they're having full prep weeks with no contact at all. This is a guy who was, all CFL tackle free. How do you practice blocking a defensive end coming off the edge if you can't hit him? Like you can do all the handwork you want, but how does it actually work? As far as joint practices this year, Marsh, I really think the greatest value will come in some of those young DBs picking up the waggle.
Yeah.
Like, a young DB, whatever his name might be, can you guard Shaq Evans? Like, can you guard him? Can you keep up with him? If he gives you a double move, where are you? Are you 3 yards off of him? Are you 5 and long gone? That's where I think strong measure is going to come. Saskatchewan will get that with Darvin Adams and Kenny Lawler. It's going to be, if it does happen, I don't think they're going to be going all out on each other, but I do think some of those positional drills, passing trees, that's where the most value I think is going to come.
Yeah, for sure. It's man, when I hear you say Chris Walby's name, I just smile. And I think a lot of fans are like that too. And you know that I was a huge nerd every time I was on with you guys in your pregame show on 1290 there in Winnipeg, that I would be on with you and Westwood and Walby, and I would be so jazzed to just join that pregame show, because even now I put on old Grey Cups, CBC broadcast era Grey Cups, and I hear Walby calling games with whoever, Mark Lee, Chris Cuthbert, otherwise. And it's so good. Like that dude is it's so rare for somebody to be an incredibly talented player and an equally good broadcaster. Like you don't get that, man. You don't get people who can, because Magic Johnson, I always think of this when I think of great talented players. You can be the most incredible player, the best passer, and I can ask you, hey, how did you do that? And he'll go, I don't know. I saw it. Like there's been people that have interviewed Magic Johnson about the way he played the game, and he's like, it's just how I knew to play the game. It's like, well, that doesn't help me at all. And that's also an awful description. And then he still gets a job broadcasting the NBA on ESPN and ABC. Why? Because he's Magic, right? And it's like,
that's right.
Well, it's Magic, and he's the brand. Like Walby is a brand, and Walby is somebody that you should want to be on your broadcast, but he's not somebody you want in your broadcast because he's the big guy from the 80s and the 90s and that was in Winnipeg that you just kind of knew as like, hey, one of the greatest linemen of all time. When he actually talks the game out, you're like, oh my God, like the way that he can actually pick apart a game. And even sometimes when we were in Winnipeg, sometimes for Ticats games, when I was calling games, I would sometimes listen to the post-game show on my way out and listen to the way that he would talk about things that had nothing to do with linemen. right? And I'm a quarterback, so I love breaking down quarterbacks. But to hear him talk about Andrew Harris, or the way that the linebackers were setting up their blitzes and he could read it early on, or the rolling of coverages in the secondary, and I was like, man, I come from a quarterback background, and I feel like I know quarterbacks well, and sometimes I'm guilty of sticking to quarterbacks more than I should when I'm analyzing stuff. Walby has no fear of talking about Medlock and punting. Like, he doesn't care. He'll analyze it because he understands it. I'm like, that is incredibly rare. How much fun was it to work with that guy in that market who knows the game this well?
The greatest gift I was ever given, Marsh, was being sat next to Chris Walby in a broadcast booth. Let alone his talent on the field and his Hall of Fame status. In Winnipeg, he is an icon because of his personality and how dominant, combined with how dominant he was on the field. I got to watch 6 seasons of Blue Bombers football next to him. And when I tell people or talk to people about that, the first question is, wow, like, how much football did you learn from Chris Walby? No. I learned more about broadcasting than anything from Chris Walby. He called 10 Grey Cups for CBC and a variety of the networks when the rights were kind of jumping around there.
Right.
The amount of preparation he would do coming into the week, like he would sit down, 45 minutes before we go to air, and he would have 5 full sheets of paper full of handwritten notes. And I always kept this one thing in my locker at the radio station. It was Walby's bundle, and it was like 4 different colored highlighters and 7 ballpoint pens. And I would give him his, like, he's like, you got my bundle? Yeah, here's your bundle. And he, like, the mark, like it looked like a play-by-play call sheet. He would mark everything down and take notes on everything. And then the stream of consciousness when we did our halftime show of what's happening, what has happened, what the keys are for the second half, what he liked, what he didn't like, came out so fluid because he was so prepared. So yeah, I learned about zone blocking schemes and linebacker alignments and twists and stunts and all this football stuff from Chris Walby, but I learned about broadcasting as much as anything with him. And, I'm going to miss doing radio with him. He's become a very close friend of mine. But if people out there don't know Chris Walby, get on YouTube and search. There's some clips of him like mic'd up on the field, and it reiterates what many people say about him. He talked more on the sidelines than any coach. He talked more in the huddle than any quarterback. But when he was talking, he wasn't just this loudmouth. People listened because he knew what he was talking about, and he still does. And, he turned 65 recently. I'm probably going to get a phone call for mentioning his age. I remember when he had his champagne birthday, when he turned 63 for that iconic 63 on his jersey, he said, "This is your champagne birthday." He liked that. But the amount of football he has absorbed, he's probably forgotten more than the rest of us will ever know. And he's truly a special individual.
Man, what a gift. That is amazing. That's so cool to hear you talk about the way that he influenced you as a broadcaster, because there's so many people across the country who would love to sit down and just spend 10 minutes with him, let alone 6 years. Right. That's real, man. That's real, genuine stuff. And I would say that, for mentioning his age, he's going to find you and pull your underwear up over the top of your head, but he's also not a bully. He's also one of the nicer people, which goes
biggest teddy bear, biggest teddy bear ever, like the gentlest giant ever,
which makes it even more unique.
I should mention Troy Westwood too, like the all-time leading scorer in Blue Bombers history, 661 straight converts. Of course, those are the short converts, but he said the only reason I hit 661 straight was because it was that easy. You could do it with your eyes closed. Working with those two, their friendship, all of our friendship really that grew out of it. I learned a lot from Troy about how to see things through a different lens. I couldn't have been more fortunate to have those two guys really teach me as much as, just be able to share the airwaves with them.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I got one more question for you here, Darrin, before I let you go, which if anybody is watching on YouTube, they can see we're recording this a little bit later on because I made Darrin wait until I was done watching Jon Rahm win the US Open until we could actually start recording this bad boy on a Sunday night. But the one thing I want to ask you here is I always like when I get a chance to chat with people who are either starting up something new like you are with Bonfire Sports TV, or if it is something that's an entity that they're doing from home right now because of the pandemic and everything's being done virtually. I want to give them a behind the scenes tour. And I'm looking at your backdrop right now, and I see a Colts helmet. I see a wonderfully backlit moose. I see what I think is a CFL football. I see what appears to be an old EE helmet before the Elks all of a sudden debuted. There's all sorts of fun stuff that's in there. So please give us a background tour of the studio that we expect to see on CFL 360 here, so that when people are watching you do your actual show and you don't have time to talk about what's behind you, they can actually see it, because mine is digitally imposed, so it's boring as hell, but yours is real and it's actually super interesting. So please give us the tour.
Yeah, thanks. I call it the lab because this is where all the work's done. I live with a scientist, so maybe I draw that from her a little bit. But the moose, look, just a beast, an absolute unit, has to be there. I got a bunch of CFL footballs, a bunch of the CFL helmets. I've been a Colts guy since they drafted Peyton Manning out of Tennessee. Just loved watching him play. Stuck with the Colts through all that. I'll make one adjustment for you though, Marsh, because this is one you might appreciate.
Oh, what is this? Oh, wow.
So that's Kenny Payne. In my opinion, the greatest Blue Bomber of all time. Won the Rose Bowl, came to Canada despite being drafted in the NFL. He played quarterback, he punted, he played DB and safety as well. And this is the crazy thing. I found out he lives down the street from me.
Oh, yeah.
I saw him getting his mail the other day. He won 4 Grey Cups in 6 appearances over 10 years. True, absolute legend. Kenny Payne signs his name. Kenny Payne, old number 11. Legend. Absolutely my favorite Blue Bomber of all time, even though I never had the chance to watch him in his time, but he's still happy and vibrant and healthy, and a real gentleman as well. So you curate things through the years, and the helmets, I guess it's this shoulder, the helmets that, I thought just would bring a little bit of appeal and let people know as soon as they tune in, you're going to hear about everybody in the league. Not just a couple of Winnipeg guys talking about Winnipeg football. And I felt that was important because this league is small as it is big, and as similar as it is diverse. And it all comes around. If something happens in your market, it's going to happen again in another market. So you can learn from what's happened in the past and what's going to happen in the coming years. And, I'm not a Blue Bombers fan. I was growing up because I lived and breathed the game from really like the age of 10 until today. But I just love this game. I love American and Canadian football, with my whole being. And I really just want to share that passion with everybody else and do what I can to provide a little piece of reprieve for people's day so they can go into a game maybe knowing something that they didn't know before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's going to be successful for you guys. So we're all excited for you. I will say this about Kenny Payne. I feel bad because when I went back through during the middle of the pandemic where I was watching old Grey Cups, I watched a bunch of his old Grey Cups and I was applying my modern sensibilities to Kenny Payne's passing game. And I was not happy with the results because it was a different time. They were asked to do different things. He was playing the game as a different style. The offense was completely different. And I realized about halfway through watching his Grey Cups, I'm like, why am I comparing him to what I'm used to now? That's not fair. That's not a thing that I should. You have to look at everything in context. And I agree with you, man. When he was doing what he was effective at for the Bombers over that time period, he was as good as anybody that was in the game at any position. And you have to have huge respect for it. So that's cool to hear that he's down the street from you though, too, because it's one of the things where for me, like Russ Jackson is, 10, 15 minutes away from me here in Hamilton. And every time I get the opportunity, I tap into calling Russ or reaching out to him or just being able to use him as a resource because I'm like, I can't believe that dude is available. Like it doesn't.
That's the thing, Marsh. That's what makes the Canadian Football League so special. Yeah. These people on the field are us.
Yeah.
Like these aren't, LeBron James superstars, in their own realm. This isn't The Rock. This is the guy living down the street. These are the guys you went to high school with. This game is accessible and it's our identity because it's literally us on the field. I don't think a lot of people truly understand that, but the examples are out there. You just need the right people to tell you about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, congratulations on launching Bonfire Sports TV, man. I know that we're looking forward to seeing what you have to create there. CFB is going to support it as much as we possibly can because we care about you and we know that you're going to do great stuff. So, Darrin, I'm looking forward to chatting throughout the CFL season, man. Continued success, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks so much, Marsh. Appreciate it, man. Be well.